We've already spoken quite a bit about the challenges of connectivity, and it would appear that a lot of the mitigations around bank closures actually, they're really about shifting people towards online banking. So would you agree that a lot of the mitigations are actually relying on good connectivity when we've already identified that connectivity remains a challenging issue for large parts of the country?
It's clearly a component, but I think what we would look to first is what is the outcome that we want to provide for that individual consumer? What is the solution that they are looking for, and how best and most efficiently could that be delivered? So yes, there will be certain technologies that are reliant on 4G, 5G broadband. There are others less so. So you come back to telephony, etc., and that in itself can provide that landline, can provide that connectivity into the solution that delivers the best outcome.
So is connectivity taken into account when there is a decision taken to close a bank branch?
As I understand, the colleagues, as I say, will be able to talk in more detail about the assessments that they make.
Okay. And how do you respond to the suggestion that banks don't understand the scale of the challenges involved in accessing more distant branches in rural Scotland in terms of time, cost and transport reliability? And I will just come back also to that online connectivity. This committee has heard time and again from communities across the Highlands and Islands and elsewhere in the country of the rural penalty. Everything costs more and there are more barriers to accessing the services that they need. So do banks actually understand this?
So I don't know that any bank would lightly dismiss a decision to close a branch. It's carefully considered and assessed, and you've seen some of the process that goes through. It's a regulated procedure. The question of connectivity and the wider infrastructure provision that creates some of that premium, I think, is something for the infrastructure providers to support you with. I'm not clear on their plans necessarily to broaden or extend coverage.
Well, in the same way that I asked if connectivity is taken into account when the decision is taken to close a branch, equally transport should be a very important factor, because rural areas have significant difficulties in being able to travel as well because of the decline in a lot of local bus services. So I would argue that these factors need to be taken into consideration too, particularly when perhaps small businesses really rely on having that face-to-face contact. But as my colleague Mr MacDonald said earlier, they may have to travel extensively to do that, and not everyone perhaps has the means.
Yes, and I think when Link undertake their visits to locations, for example, those are certainly factors that they would take into account in the consideration of whether an alternative provision is warranted. Equally for banks, clearly they will be empathetic to local circumstances, and those may differ in rural areas to more urban areas, and that's part of the assessment that they would undertake.
Thank you. You mentioned extensive consultation with communities. Can you just confirm that that's after the decision's taken rather than before?
It's as a part of that decisioning process.
Okay. So, can you give me any examples of where a community consultation has taken place and the community said very strongly that they need the bank to stay, and that has been the decision to keep a branch open?
I can give you examples of where a decision has been changed off the back of consultation, and I think Link will be able to give examples of appeals that have been upheld where a decision, for example, for a hub may not have been taken. I don't have that fact base with me just now, but happy to provide it to the committee.
I would be delighted to see that information. I know it was of great concern to my constituents when I was a councillor in Whitburn, when the last bank closed there, and I know colleagues will share those experiences when we have had the last banks close and people have been left without access to in-person banking services. And despite huge consultation and several meetings, the decision was still final. So I would really be keen to see the information that you have on that, where decisions have been changed. Thank you. I think this is more directed towards Mr Foden and Ms Simister-Thomas. You had mentioned the issues with printing, but also with the ability to pay in cheques. And I know that they're two very different issues, and perhaps one is more around the partnership model and the constraints of that model and considerations like security and things like that. And also the issue with cheques, as was raised with me by staff in a local, I think it was a post office within one of the banking hubs in my constituency of Bathgate and Linlithgow, is more to do with a particular bank and its processes. So I just wonder how much the partnership model and the decisions by individual banks are actually hampering your ability to deliver a full range of services to people in areas where there are no banks left.
So I'd say we are not a separate body from our banks. We are our bank, the banks working together. And so what we try to do is we preserve, say, their ability to make different decisions in how they serve their customers. I think, I mentioned earlier, we did see negative customer feedback around cheque deposits, as you said. What we are able to do with our banks is that we are constantly gathering feedback from our customers. We've got tablets we do in banking hubs where customers can feedback. We look at this data regularly. We send out colleagues to talk anecdotally or to do particular research studies, so we can understand a lot of what customers are seeing and what they're telling us in banking hubs, and we can share that information back with our participating firms, particularly around those vulnerable customer segments where we have a real concentration of those sorts of customers, and perhaps particular insight into that. And I think it's publicly reported that Lloyds have changed that decision now around depositing cheques. They're going to re-enable cheque deposits.
There is also the issue around printing statements. Not everybody has a computer at home. And I think the point I'm making is it's not a like for like service that's been delivered to people where the last bank's closed.
Yeah, we have been working with our banks to find facility to be able to print statements in hubs, and as I said, to enable some of the other journeys that depend on printers. As you referenced yourself, it is more complicated than it might appear because of the need to get appropriate data security to guard against customer data being shared the day when the printer malfunctions and the customer data is left there. And so we have worked really hard with our banks to create a model that can do that. We've got printers in several pilot locations, including 3 of the hubs in Scotland, and we're working with our banks over the next couple of weeks of discussions to look at how we roll that out more broadly.
Thank you.